Tommy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Signore e signori, grazie per l'invito. It's my pleasure. So can you hear me well in the back? Thank you. My name is Tommi Linna. I'm from Helsinki, Finland. And this time I will give you a presentation on my FD70. It's my youngest bambino, 4 anni. I'm from Helsinki, as I said, and this is how it's like in Helsinki for a birthday party during the epidemic. So these are my friends. I'm there in the middle. It's only 2-3 kilometers from downtown Helsinki. Seaside in the back is south, less than 100 kilometers from Estonia. The sea gets frozen. It's terrible cold at the best. Yesterday it was too warm for me. This is like -15 and high winds. These are the conditions where Vaisala sensors get developed. Of course they get developed there, but tested elsewhere and everywhere. So pleasure to be here. Grazie mille. This is my statement. It's a factual statement. FD70, the newest Vaisala forward scatter sensor since 4 years, been able to detect every single precipitation particle. So 100% of precipitation particles falling through the sample volume. And this is the key thing and the biggest differentiator we have to anything before developed. Here is the content, so a very brief overview and then a small dig into technology, new innovative patented forward scatter sensor, and then the key of the presentations here is a few performance examples. Then shedding light on how come it can be so reliable no matter what the weather condition is. Easy installation, low maintenance and summary if time allows. Beginning from overview. So forward scatter sensor inspired by FS11 and PWE designs, which are the predecessors of the unit. Here we have two-headed sensor, one transmitter like the right hand part of it. This is the right hand, the transmitter, and then the receiver. Depending on which features you select, it's also available as like three-headed version. So it is a optical weather sensor installed at the surface, observing what is the precipitation, what's the obscuration of the atmosphere, how far one can see for visibility, the MOR, the meteorological optical range. It also has some other very specific details when it comes to identifying a huge variety of different precipitation particles. Here I only list a few applications, but only our imagination is the limit for what we can use it for when it comes to meteorological observations. Main applications for the present have been airports and meteorological networks. So how it works, it transmits light from the receiver, from the transmitter, here illustrated in red. What's different from other forward scatter sensor is that here we have a very, very thin light sheet instead of a light cone. With bluish color, I'm illustrating here the viewing angles of the two receivers. So there is an intersection where we have the transmitter beam and the receiver view angles intersect, and from that so-called sample volume here in the middle, or actually sample plane in this question, we get scattering from the transmitted light back to the receiver and the side receiver, and then we can interpret what is there in the air and how harmful this, for example, to a human visibility experience. It's possible only to develop these kind of things if we have experience. So basically, we have more than 30,000 visibility sensors of forward scatters type installed all over the world since decades back. So this now here is our 7th generation sensor, and it bases on that experience from the install base observations and real challenges reported by customers. So it's there now, it's available since a few years back already, and there is always a question that, okay, the FS11B, the predecessor, was already the top of the world performance forward scatter and precipitation sensor, so why this one was developed? This bases on a vast market study and interviews of our largest customers, like a few dozen customers all over the world, the largest meteorological organizations. This is a list of those things which are considered as gaps and cons of forward scatter sensors. First of all is missing events. So they are blind to the smallest particles. Also, in some cases, for example, not enough heating to keep it clean, or some other measurement disturbances like sunlight entering the receiver and such. Precipitation accumulation performance: if the sensor cannot see the smallest particles, it cannot report accumulation or intensity reliably. Also type identification: when it comes to the smallest particles, like very small drizzle, it still can be of freezing type, which is very critical in operational applications. So that has been a challenge tackled now. We are also reporting droplet size distributions, so this helps us, for example, to compare the sensor response to weather radar response, because we can calculate basically radar reflectivity from the forward scatter sensor installed on the surface. And in the modern world, software security. So this kind of a cyber type of threats, now we have full security features implemented in this sensor and also in CL61 and otherwise a lot of new sensors. So we have peace of mind in that respect too. These gaps have been filled in all these areas. So basically this is a simple collection what the FD70 reports. For example, precipitation types, intensity, accumulations, visibility up to 100 kilometers thanks to superior sensitivity. Also temperature, droplet size, humidity, and this mentioned radar reflectivity for future comparisons against the response from weather radars, if you like. All this enables actually this to be very cost efficient. So in real it is actually many products in one. It can replace all these different sensors listed here. The image comes from FAA and National Weather Service maintained ASOS networks. It has more than 1,000 sensor systems all over the US continent and remote areas. And this is the sensor system has a couple of Vaisala sensors there, but here I'm just illustrating tangible that okay, these circled ones can be replaced with one line with one unit, the FD7. Short glance on technology. As mentioned, it all bases on light sheet. So this light sheet enables us to concentrate the transmitted power in very small area, kind of a plane, instead of illuminating a larger area with cones. And because we need to be eye safe in all these applications, if we use the light cone, like illuminating traditional way, it would be impossible to add that much power that is needed for detecting the smallest drizzle particle. But when we concentrate the light in a very thin light sheet, we can actually apply more power per volume and still be eye safe compared to the conventional way. and this illustrates the small cross-section of transmitted light and then the view angle of the receiver. Okay, in addition to this high power in small volume, we need to sample it at very high sample speed or rate. Basically, 5 million samples a second at maximum is enough to have several hits in every particle, no matter how fast they travel or no matter how small they are. And with 5 million samples a second, one needs very powerful signal processing. The processor is there in the middle of the sensor, and we are using the most modern and powerful calculating hardware available in the sensor. Okay, that was fast overview, and then some key performance examples, and these based on real data gathered from the field with reference sensors. And I've had the luxury of witnessing this drizzle sensitivity. So the sensitivity is there to degree that it actually is more than required for detecting and identifying the smallest drizzle particles. The limit for drizzle report is in diameter 0.2 millimeters for a precipitation particle. So if the particle is larger than 0.2 millimeters in diameter, it is supposed to be reported as precipitation. But our sensor can actually see beyond, down to 0.1 millimeters in diameter. So we can select that, okay, we get those 1.1 millimeter diameter particles detected and identified, and then we can decide that, okay, if it looks like the particle size is growing to 0.2 millimeters, then we start the drizzle report. Okay, this is a varying event from Helsinki, and here I'm illustrating the sensitivity. So in y-axis we have millimeters. As you can see, it begins from 0.05 millimeters and ends up to 0.35 millimeters. So it's very, very weak event. As a function of time, we illustrate that the FT70 starts its precipitation report an hour before the second most sensitive sensor, PWD22, does the same. So we have very light event result and very slow accumulation of precipitation. So 1 hour before PWD22, a very sensitive weather sensor starts its accumulation report, the FT70 is already there. And then compared to weighing rain gauge, it's a reference performance level weighing rain gauge, it only starts its reporting like 2 hours later. What is very interesting and what explains this performance there is the sensitivity to the degree that we can actually divide those precipitation particles to different baskets. So this is the same event with all the seen and measured detected particles calculated in different size baskets. So on the x-axis we have different sizes, 0.12 millimeters median, 0.14, 0.17 and so on. And there in logarithmic scale on the y-axis we have number of droplets per square centimeter. And there I also illustrate the size of drizzle particle, and then when we go higher than 0.5 millimeters, the event is supposed to be reported as rain. And now it gets even more interesting. This is a conventional forward scatter sensor with a light cone transmitter and conventional receiver. It only can see rain in real. So it's blind to the smaller particles here, like drizzle particles. If we enhance the system and add a conventional optical light sheet based distrometer, here in orange, it can see down to the drizzle category. However, it actually struggles seeing smaller than 0.3 millimeter particles. So completely blind particles. Then we add FD70, which then sees beyond, down to smaller than what is even supposed to be reported as precipitation. So this is the interesting area, and how can we know that we are not seeing noise, but we are seeing particles? Of course, one can interpret from the shape of the illustration that yes, it looks natural, but we also have installed many high-speed cameras. Hey sir, I can take a couple slides back if you want to take the shot, and I can also share the material if you like. Thanks. Then another one is identification. So here it's kind of a robot or an optic eye, because it can scan the smallest particles and then interpret what is the state. Is it liquid? If it's frozen? So this important example, it's real data, comes from Helsinki-Vantaa, a human observer, a qualified professional human observer reporting freezing conditions. Very interestingly here, well, when we have an observer with blue and then FD70 report with orange, and higher the height of the report, these are WMO codes, the more severe the event is. Interestingly there, FD70 starts its report with different types, rain and snow, then rain, drizzle, and then mixed drizzle and rain. But it's always a step ahead of a human observer, which starts with drizzle report something like a half an hour, 1 hour later. And then the conditions develop, and both the sensor and the human start agreeing very strongly about, okay, in question is rain, and then suddenly freezing rain. Also noteworthy, FD70 is several minutes, like maybe 10 to 15 minutes time earlier than the human observer, which eventually agrees with the sensor. So conditions developing to freezing rain, and a very long period, hours of freezing rain event, so very severe condition. Time to time the FD70 switches to rain and snow, higher category, and then gets back to freezing rain. What is very interesting there in the next is that, okay, there are ice pellets, which is of course an indication that there is a freezing layer aloft higher in the atmosphere. Both also there agree, observer and FD70. And then even more interestingly, in the next step, FD70 keeps on reporting freezing rain, and then rain and snow, while observer degrades down to freezing drizzle. And there we can also agree that, okay, which one is more accurate or correct in this case? Is it the human observer or is it the sensor? With high resolution camera images at this hour, we can actually calculate the diameter of the particle, seeing that it is larger than drizzle. So in this case, the sensor beats for a while the human observer, and after that they continue agreeing about the event. I will be very brief here, but this is the performance, and this is a comparison for freezing drizzle, a severe event, and freezing rain, another very severe event, for example for air traffic. The agreement between the observer and the sensor for freezing drizzle, which is the most difficult one to identify because of the small particle size, and then you need to try and figure out if it was liquid or if it was frozen. But the agreement is pretty good. Freezing rain is easier for sensors, 90-70% agreement. Unfortunately, I need to skip a few of these. I want to mention that in addition to this freezing conditions calculation, we are able to now identify sand, dust in the air, and then use a specific algorithm with the help of an additional side receiver to identify sand and dust, and then calculate MOR in sand and dust obscuration. So the second receiver is needed if you want to have not standard level freezing conditions reporting, but extreme superior level freezing, drizzle freezing conditions reporting, then you need the second receiver. And if you want to identify dust and report visibility in dust, then we need the optional side receiver. So depending on the need, the sensor will have its hardware configuration. Only a couple of slides. We are in Helsinki. We are testing in Helsinki in somewhat wintry, sometimes terrible conditions, but we also go everywhere else. So from desert to tundra, I have one unit in Red Sea coastline where we have humidity, sand, wind, and every nasty thing which can be imagined when it comes to sand and getting the windows dirty. FD70 copes well after we've been testing here for a couple of years and seeing how the windows get dirty, how can we prevent that, and how can we compensate the negative effect. Installation, and this is final moments, very easy, straightforward. These are my colleagues. As you can see, sometimes in Helsinki we are also having summer-like weather. Not warm but sunny.
Idea-like.
Readily calibrated and ready to go. Just fire it up and initiate the software, enter the codes and have the sensor be there. So basically only twice a year cleaning windows. In some extreme cases one needs to clean them more often and then maybe checking the calibration once a year. In practice the calibration does not drift, but checking the calibration is for like a security preventive measure. As a summary, we have here a reference grade sensor, fully designed, available and suitable for operational use. It never misses a weather event, it detects everything, versatile and cost efficient. So here I want to close and end and thank you very much for your interest. Grazie mille. These are the figures from the field. Grazie.
Ci sono domande?
Due domande veloci. First, maximum size of particles that can be detected. The second one is, have you ever tested the FD70 in blowing snow conditions?
Yes, thank you, sir. Good questions. Maximum particle, it's roughly something between 30 millimeters and 40 millimeters. I would say that for detection it might be even larger. So first detect that there was something and then after you see that okay there was something, try to identify it. But if we are talking about very large hail particles, it is larger than 3 centimeters, 30 millimeters in diameter. So pretty large, and the maximum size is limited by the physical dimension of this sample plane and sample volumes. Roughly from 0.1 millimeters up to something like 35 millimeters. We have tested in snow. So basically Helsinki, Vantaa airport, the Norwegian airports, the winter conditions are there like weekly basis in this time of year. We've seen that the wind and snow do not cause like the wind doesn't cause like extra error on the measurement. In some cases where you can see the error clearly in some experiments, if the sample volume would be like higher somewhere in between or shadowed by some structure, then it might cause a problem. But the speed of the particle in that sample plane, we have not seen problems. So basically, in our test field, we have a setup where we have several sensors, FS11, PWD, and FD70 with different rotations so that we can check the wind speed effect there.
So, thank you for your interesting presentation. Two quick questions about the small particle. One, does the instrument provide special classes for these small drizzle droplets, so less than 0.2, or is classified as drizzle? First question. And the second one is, you talk about dust, but do you improve also the visibility estimation in fog?
Thank you, sir. About particle size, just a second. Here, we categorize precipitation, all particles, no matter what is the state, whether it's snow or frozen or liquid, into this kind of baskets internally in the sensor. These here and smaller are considered like fog particles or droplets, and if the particle size increases and exceeds 0.2 millimeters in diameter, then we initiate drizzle reporting, and we keep on calculating this particle size distribution all the time. So the sensor gathers that data, and it also calculates these particles' negative effect to visibility experience. But if we are here in this domain, there is no precipitation report because of the limit. But the beauty in the calculation is that when the sensor actually manages to see those particles, it can calculate their negative effect to visibility reporting. So if we have rain, a heavy rain, it doesn't necessarily deteriorate the visibility conditions very violently. But if we have the same amount of precipitation, liquid precipitation in the air, a small particle drizzle, then the visibility goes down very dramatically. Did I answer the question? Yes. Another one was, the fog. Yeah, we can't promise any forward scatter sensor with forward scatter technology cannot be more accurate than 10% of uncertainty in low visibility conditions. It's the limitation of the technology. So in real conditions, we will achieve 10% plus minus, and we promise that one. But we couldn't promise like 5% because it's like physically impossible. That's why I always promote the transmissometer to those conditions where one wants to achieve plus minus 1% or less. But the transmissometers then on the higher visibilities, over 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers, they don't know anything about visibility anymore. But then we get the kind of the benefit of the forward scatter sensor, because forward scatter sensor visibility accuracy at very high visibilities is still 20%. Unless you don't identify dust. So if there is dust and if you don't identify it, then the sensor fails and the error is larger. Thank you very much for the question.
Ok, possiamo quindi considerare chiusa l'intervento.
Grazie mille a tutti voi, abbiamo finito con le presentazioni e per il prossimo abbiamo pranzo. Vorrei ringraziare Generale Baione per la possibilità di dare queste presentazioni oggi qua nella Casa dell'Aviatore. Vorrei ringraziare tutti i miei colleghi, Euroelettronica, e a tutti voi, l'Aeronautica Militare, Comando Logistico, Arba Piemonte, Arba Lombardia, il CNR, l'ENAV e tutti gli gli altri che sono oggi qua presenti, la Marina, militare anche, manca qualcuno, e tutti voi, a Generale Tangora naturalmente anche, grazie mille. E adesso quindi concludiamo qua, continuiamo con il pranzo. Se il generale vuole aggiungere qualche parola, per favore. Grazie.